The Great Hall of the Galactic Hunters Academy buzzed with nervous energy. Cadets from dozens of worlds sat in perfect rows, their different forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. Four-armed Kalari sat next to scaled reptins, tall, gray. Altairs towered over small, furry vixens. In the middle of this alien crowd, three humans looked almost boring by comparison. Kang Day sat quietly in the third row. His black hair was cut short, military style. His dark eyes watched everything but showed nothing. Next to him, Park Min shifted in his seat, unable to stay still. On his other side, Lee Hana took careful notes on her datapad, recording every word the instructor said. At the front of the hall, Instructor Vex Rothan stood behind a metal podium. His forearms moved as he spoke, pointing at the massive screen behind him. The Kalari's blue skin seemed to glow under the bright lights. His voice carried easily through the hall, deep and serious. "Today we discuss the Arctic death trial," Rothan said. The hall fell silent. Even the most talkative cadets stopped whispering. For 300 years, this simulation has remained unbeaten. 3,847 attempts, 0 successes. The screen showed images of a frozen wasteland. Snow fell in thick curtains. Ice covered everything. The wind howled so loud they could hear it through the speakers. Temperature readings in the corner showed numbers that made several cadets shiver, -80 degrees. "The trial lasts 72 hours, Rothan continued. 3 days in the harshest environment we can create. Blizzards that never stop. Temperatures that can freeze blood in your veins. Mechanical predators that hunt without mercy." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Most cadets quit in the first 6 hours. The longest anyone has lasted is 31 hours. A hand shot up in the crowd. Vel Sandor, prince of the desert world Saran, stood tall and proud. His golden skin gleamed like metal. "Instructor, surely the great Sarani warriors could conquer this frozen waste. We have survived in deserts where others die in minutes." Rothan's laugh was not kind. "Prince Sandor, your people have tried this trial 43 times. Your best warrior lasted 8 hours before the cold stopped his heart. Please sit down." Sandor's face turned red, but he sat. Around him, other cadets smirked. The prince was known for his big talk and bigger ego. "The Glacians hold the current record," Rothan said. An image appeared on screen showing tall, white-skinned beings. They looked like they were made of ice themselves. "Frostwalker Yill lasted 31 hours and 17 minutes before hypothermia forced us to extract him. If beings born on ice worlds cannot complete this trial, what hope do the rest of us have?" Near the back, Stone-Mind Kef raised his gray hand. The Altair's voice was calm and measured. "Instructor, has any species come close to completion? What factors cause failure?" "Good question, Cadet Kef." Rothan's 4 arms worked the controls. New images appeared. "The main killers are cold, exhaustion, and despair. The simulation is designed to break both body and mind. The cold attacks your body. The isolation and hallucinations attack your mind. Most cadets break mentally before the cold kills them." Park Min leaned over to whisper to Day. "This sounds insane. Why would anyone try it?" Day didn't answer right. Away. He studied the images on screen. Snow patterns, wind direction, the way ice formed on rocks. His grandfather had taught him to read weather like this. Old Man Kim had been a mountain rescue specialist back on Earth. He used to say that nature wasn't an enemy to fight, but a puzzle to solve. "The trial is voluntary," Rothan announced. "No cadet is required to attempt it. Those who try and fail are not punished. But those who succeed—" He smiled, showing sharp teeth. "There has never been a those who succeed. That's why the trial remains." The hall erupted in nervous chatter. Cadets turned to each other, discussing the challenge. Most seemed excited by the idea. A few looked terrified. The humans sat quietly. "I will open the volunteer list tomorrow," Rothan said. "Think carefully. This is not a game. The simulation feels real because it is real. The cold will hurt. The fear will be real. Some of you may suffer lasting damage to your minds. The Academy's medical staff is excellent, but they cannot fix everything." As cadets began to file out, arguing and discussing the trial, Day remained seated. He closed his eyes and remembered his grandfather's voice. The old man had rescued hundreds of people from Korea's mountains. He had survived avalanches, blizzards, and temperatures that killed trained soldiers. Fear is just information, his grandfather used to say. It tells you what might go wrong. Listen to it, then decide what to do. Day? Lee Hana touched his shoulder. Are you thinking about trying it? He opened his eyes. Maybe. Park Min stared at him. Are you crazy? Did you hear what he said? Nobody has ever finished it. Nobody. That's exactly why someone should try, Dai said quietly. Around them, the great hall had mostly emptied. Only a few small groups remained, still talking about the trial. Near the front, Prince Sandor argued loudly with several other cadets. His voice carried across the room. The trial is designed by weaklings for weaklings, Sandor declared. A true warrior adapts and overcomes. I will show these off-worlders what Sarani strength means. Stone Mind Kef's gray form was nearby, taking notes. The Altair seemed to be calculating something, probably the mathematical odds of success. His people loved numbers and patterns, but it was the quiet figure near the instructor's podium that caught Day's attention. Frostwalker Yil stood alone, staring at the now blank screen. The Glacian's white skin looked almost transparent under the lights. His ice-blue eyes held something Day recognized, the look of someone who had failed at something important. Day stood up. I'm going to talk to him. To who? Hana asked. The record holder. Park Min grabbed his arm. Day, don't do something stupid. But Day was already walking down the steps. His feet made no sound on the metal floor. He had learned to move quietly in the mountains where noise could start an avalanche. Frostwalker Yil noticed him approaching. The Glacian was nearly 2 meters tall, with long white hair that moved like it was underwater. His clothes seemed to be made of some kind of ice cloth that never melted. You are the human, Yil said. His voice sounded like wind through ice caves. I am Kang Day. I know who you are. Your people's exchange program is noted. Yil's eyes studied Day carefully. You think differently than the others. I can see it. How do you mean? Yil was quiet for a long moment. The others see the trial as a battle to win. You see it as something else. What do you see, human? Day thought about his grandfather's lessons. A conversation. For the first time, Yil's expression changed. His ice-blue eyes widened slightly. Interesting. Most beings try to fight the cold, fight the wind, fight the fear. You cannot fight weather, human. It simply is. My grandfather taught me that. Wise grandfather. Yil paused. I lasted 31 hours by fighting. By using every trick my people know about surviving cold. It was not enough. The simulation learned my tricks and used them against me. What made you quit? Yil's face grew sad. I saw my home burning, my family screaming for help. I knew it. Was not real, but... He shook his head. The mind can only take so much. Behind them, Instructor Rothan was packing up his equipment. His 4 arms moved efficiently, storing data chips and powering down screens. He noticed Day and Yil talking and moved closer. Cadet Day, Rothan said. You seem very interested in this trial. Yes, sir. Why? Your people are not known for extreme environment survival. You are adaptable, yes, but this goes beyond adaptation. This is about endurance in impossible conditions. Day looked back at the blank screen where the frozen wasteland had been displayed. Maybe that's exactly why a human should try, sir. We think differently. Rothan's 4 arms stopped moving. He studied Day with new interest. Explain. Other species have specialized advantages. Glacians understand cold. Sahrani understand heat. Altairs understand calculations. Humans, we understand change. Change? We adapt not by being the strongest or fastest or smartest, Day said. We adapt by finding new ways to do old things. Maybe the trial has never been beaten because everyone tries to beat it the same way. The hall had grown very quiet. Even Prince Sandor had stopped talking and moved closer to listen. Stone Mind Kef stood nearby, his gray face showing intense interest. Instructor Rothan was silent for nearly a minute. His blue skin seemed to darken as he thought. Finally, he spoke. The volunteer list opens tomorrow at 800 hours. Anyone who wishes to attempt the trial may sign up. He looked directly at Day. Think very carefully, cadet. This simulation has broken minds much stronger than yours. Yes, sir, I understand. As the instructor gathered his things and left, the remaining cadets slowly dispersed. Frostwalker Yill placed a cold hand on Day's shoulder. If you attempt this trial, human, remember what I learned too late. The cold is not your enemy. The wind is not your enemy. Your own mind will be your greatest enemy. Then the Glacian was gone, moving like a ghost through the empty hall. Park Min and Lee Hana hurried over to Day. Both looked worried. Please tell me you're not seriously thinking about this, Hana said. Day looked at his friends. They had been through training together for 6 months. They knew him well enough to see he had already made up his mind. I have to try, he said. Simply, why? Park Min demanded. Why risk everything for a stupid trial that... The simulation pod looked like a metal coffin. Day lay inside, wearing thick winter gear that felt heavy and uncomfortable. Sensors attached to his body would monitor everything: his heart rate, body temperature, brain activity. If any reading went too dangerous, the simulation would automatically shut down and extract him. Through the pod's small window, he could see the observation deck. Dozens of cadets pressed against the glass, watching him. Some held data pads ready to record his attempt. Others had placed bets on how long he would last. The smart money said less than 6 hours. Instructor Rothan's voice came through the speakers. Cadet Day, are you ready to begin? Yes, sir. Remember, you can call for extraction at any time. Say the words, emergency extraction, and the simulation will end immediately. There is no shame in quitting when your life is in danger. Day closed his eyes. I understand, sir. Beginning simulation in 3, 2, 1. The world vanished in a flash of white light. When Day opened his eyes, he was standing in hell. Wind screamed around him, carrying snow so thick he couldn't see his own hands. The cold hit him like a punch to the face. Even through his thick gloves, his fingers began to ache within seconds. The simulation had placed him on a flat, open plain with no shelter in sight. Snow came down so hard it looked like white static on an old television. The wind was so loud he couldn't hear his own breathing. In the observation deck, cadets leaned forward to watch the screens showing Day's vital signs. His heart rate had jumped when the simulation started, but now it was slowing down. His body temperature was dropping, but still within safe limits. Look at him, Prince Sandor said, pointing at the main screen showing Day's position. He's just standing there. Is he frozen already? But Day wasn't frozen. He was listening. His grandfather had taught him that weather always follows patterns. Wind doesn't blow randomly. It follows the shape of the land. Snow doesn't fall evenly. It collects in some places and avoids others. For 20 minutes, Day stood perfectly still in the howling storm. Other cadets had run immediately looking for shelter. But running in a blizzard was the fastest way to get lost and die. Instead, Day felt the wind. He noticed how it pushed him from different directions. He watched how the snow moved. Slowly, a picture began to form in his mind. The wind was stronger from his left side. That meant there was probably high ground that way. High ground meant ridges. Ridges meant possible shelter. Finally, he began to move. Not running, but walking slowly and carefully. Each step was tested before he put his weight down. In snow, this deep, a single wrong step could send him falling into a hidden crack in the ground. He's moving, Lee Hana said, watching the tracking display, but so slowly. At this rate, it will take him hours to reach any shelter. Stone-Mind Kef studied the environmental data. Actually, his course is quite efficient. See how he's following the wind patterns? He's not fighting the storm. He's using it to navigate. On the main screen, Day looked like a small, dark spot moving across an endless white wasteland. The camera had trouble tracking him through the snow. Sometimes he disappeared completely, only to reappear minutes later, still, moving in the same steady direction. After 2 hours of walking, Day found what he was looking for. A ridge of black rock jutted up from the snow like the spine of some buried giant. More importantly, the wind had carved caves into the softer parts of the rock, not deep caves, but enough to provide shelter from the worst of the storm. But as Day approached the rocks, his first real danger appeared. The frost stalker came out of nowhere. One moment Day was alone in the storm. The next moment red eyes glowed in the snow ahead of him. The mechanical predator was the size of a large wolf, built from metal and covered in white fur to blend with the snow. Its heat sensors had detected Day's body warmth from over a kilometer away. In the observation deck, several cadets gasped. The frost stalkers were the trial's most feared predators. Fast, smart, and completely ruthless, they had ended more attempts than the cold itself. Day saw the glowing eyes and stopped walking. The predator crouched low, preparing to attack. Its metal claws scraped against the ice as it found its footing. Most cadets faced with a frost stalker would either run or fight. Running in deep snow was useless. The mechanical beast was much faster. Fighting was equally hopeless. The creature was armored and programmed with dozens of attack patterns. Day did neither. Instead, he sat down in the snow. "What is he doing?" Parkman whispered, staring at the screen in confusion. The frost stalker was equally confused. Its programming told it to chase running prey or fight attacking prey. But sitting prey? This was not a scenario it had been designed for. For several long minutes, predator and humans stared at each other through the falling snow. The stalkers, head tilted left and right, trying to understand this strange behavior. Its sensors detected no fear chemicals, no aggressive postures, no movement that suggested flight. Slowly, Day began to speak. His voice was calm and gentle. "Hello, Metal Wolf. You're very beautiful. I can see why you're such a good hunter." He kept his hands still and his voice soft. "But I'm not running from you today, and I'm not fighting you. I'm just trying to get home." The Frost Stalker's AI processors worked furiously, trying to categorize this behavior. In its memory, banks were thousands of encounters with frightened, aggressive, or desperate prey. But calm, conversational prey? This had never happened before. After 10 minutes, something unprecedented occurred. The Frost Stalker's programming entered what computer specialists call a logic loop. Unable to classify Day as prey, predator, or obstacle, it simply stopped. The red eyes dimmed as the creature went into standby mode. Day slowly stood up and walked around the motionless predator. He even paused to pat its metal head gently. "Thank you for letting me pass, friend." In the observation deck, the silence was total. Even Instructor Rothan stared at the screens in disbelief. In 3 centuries of trials, no one had ever pacified a Frost Stalker. "How?" Frostwalker Yill whispered. "How did he do that?" Stone Mind Kef was frantically taking notes. The Predator's behavioral programming couldn't process non-threatening interaction. It's designed to hunt, not to have conversations. "Impossible," Prince Sandor declared. "It must be a malfunction." But Instructor Rothan was checking the diagnostic readings. "No malfunction. The Stalker is operating perfectly. It simply has no protocols for dealing with that." Day reached the rocky ridge and found a suitable cave. It wasn't large, but it was deep enough to get out of the wind and wide enough for him to lie down. More importantly, it faced away from the direction the storm was coming from. Once inside, Day began the careful work of setting up camp. He used his emergency blankets to reflect body heat back toward himself. He arranged his gear so everything was within easy reach. He even collected snow from outside and began melting it with his body heat to create drinking water. But the most important thing he did was psychological. Instead of sitting in the cave feeling sorry for himself, he began to talk to his grandfather. "Well, grandfather, here I am in your kind of weather," he said quietly. "Remember that storm when I was 12? You said the cold wasn't trying to hurt me. It was just being cold. The wind wasn't angry at me. It was just being wind." In the observation deck, cadets watched in fascination as Day settled into what looked like a normal camping routine. He ate some of his emergency rations. He organized his equipment. He even seemed to be meditating. "His vital signs are remarkably stable," Lee Hanna observed. "Heart rate steady, brain activity calm. He doesn't seem stressed at all." "How is that possible?" Park Min asked. "He's sitting alone in a freezing cave, being hunted by killer robots. How can he be calm? Frostwalker Yill studied the readouts with growing interest. Look at his core temperature. It's dropped, but not dangerously. He's managing his body heat very efficiently. As the first day turned into night, the simulation became even more deadly. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. The wind increased, and more frost stalkers began converging on Day's position. But something strange was happening. Instead of becoming more desperate as time passed, Day seemed to be getting more comfortable. He had turned his small cave into a surprisingly cozy shelter. The reflected heat from his emergency blankets had raised the internal temperature above freezing. His careful arrangement of gear meant he could reach everything he needed without exposing himself to the cold outside. When the second frost stalker found his cave, Day was ready. "Hello, friend number 2, he said calmly as the red eyes appeared at his cave entrance. "I'm sorry, but this cave is occupied. There's another one about 50 meters to your left. Much better drainage." The stalker tried to enter the cave, but Day had arranged his gear to create a barrier, not a wall. The creature could have easily broken through that. Instead, he had created what looked like a completely natural rockfall, using his backpack and spare clothes to simulate fallen stones. The predator's sensors detected the apparent obstacle and automatically began searching for alternative routes. Finding none that didn't require significant effort, its efficiency programming directed it to seek easier prey elsewhere. As the mechanical beast disappeared back into the storm, Day smiled. "Thanks, grandfather. Work smart, not hard. Isn't that what you always said?" By the end of the first day, Day 2 brought changes that made the first day look easy. Day woke in his cave to find the storm had intensified beyond anything in the simulation's normal parameters. The wind outside screamed like a living thing in pain. Snow didn't fall anymore. It flew horizontally, driven by winds strong enough to knock down trees. But the real change wasn't the weather. It was the predators. Through his cave entrance, Day could see glowing eyes in the distance. Not one pair, but 5. The frost stalkers had stopped hunting alone. Now they worked together, sharing information through their networked systems. What one learned, they all knew. In the observation deck, Instructor Rothan pointed to the tactical display. "This is where most attempts end," he told the watching cadets. "Individual survival skills can handle single predators, but coordinated pack hunters? That requires a completely different approach." Stone-Mind Kef studied the display with his usual methodical precision. 5 units, moving in a standard encirclement pattern. They're cutting off all escape routes. From his position! "He's trapped," Prince Sandor said. For once, his voice held no mockery, only concern. "Even if he could fight one, he can't fight 5. Lee Hanna watched Day's vital signs. His heart rate had increased slightly when the pack appeared, but not nearly as much as it should have. "He doesn't seem panicked. Look at his breathing pattern. It's still controlled." On the main screen, they could see Day moving carefully around his cave, checking his equipment. He seemed to be preparing for something, but not what anyone expected. Instead of weapons, he was gathering his explosive charges. Every cadet carried small demolition devices for emergency shelter construction. Most people forgot about them. Day was counting his carefully. What is he planning? Frostwalker Yill wondered aloud. Those charges are too small to hurt the stalkers. Day had finished his inventory. 3 shaped charges, designed to break ice or clear small rockfalls. Not much explosive power, but enough for what he had in mind. He also had his emergency flare, gun, some spare clothes, and most importantly, his knowledge of how snow behaves under pressure. The pack was moving closer. Through the cave entrance, Day could see them positioning themselves. They would attack from multiple angles, making escape impossible. It was a perfect tactical situation for them. But Day wasn't planning to escape. He crawled to the back of his cave and began placing the shaped charges against the rock wall. Not randomly, but in specific locations where he could see stress, fractures in the stone. His grandfather had taught him about avalanches, how a small disturbance in the right place could move millions of tons of snow. The pack leader approached the cave entrance. Unlike the confused individuals from yesterday, this one moved with purpose. Its red eyes scanned the interior, mapping every detail. Its partners took positions around the cave, blocking any possible exit. Day finished placing his charges and moved to the cave entrance. The pack leader was only 10 meters away, well within striking distance. The other four had formed a perfect circle around the rocky outcrop. "Hello, beautiful hunters," Day said calmly. "I see you've learned to work together. Very impressive." The pack leader's head tilted, processing this unexpected greeting. Its tactical programming indicated the prey should be terrified, not conversational. "I'm afraid I can't let you into my home," Day continued, holding up the detonator for his charges. "But I have something else to offer you." The pack hesitated. Their shared AI tried to analyze Day's behavior, but like the single stalkers before, they had no protocols for calm, friendly prey. "You want to hunt me?" Day said. "I understand. It's what you were made for. But I'm not going to run, and I'm not going to fight. Instead, I'm going to teach you something about snow." He triggered the charges. The explosion wasn't large, but it was precisely placed. The shaped charges shattered the rock face above Day's cave, sending tons of stone tumbling down. But more importantly, they destabilized the massive snow field that had built up on the ridge above. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the world began to move. The avalanche started slowly, just a trickle of snow sliding down the rock face. But as it gathered momentum, it became a roaring white monster that devoured everything in its path. The packed snow above the ridge, stressed by days of wind and weight, finally gave way. In the observation deck, alarms began blaring. The simulation's safety systems detected the massive environmental change and automatically began calculating Day's survival odds. The numbers were not encouraging. "He triggered an avalanche," Park Min said in horror. "He's going to bury himself." "And the stalkers," Lee Hana added, watching the tactical display. The 5 red dots representing the pack were being overwhelmed by the white tide of snow. Instructor Rothan watched the chaos with professional interest. "Clever. The stalkers are programmed to hunt biological targets, not to avoid natural disasters. They don't have avalanche protocols." On screen, the pack tried to scatter as the snow came down, but avalanches move faster than anything on legs. Within seconds, all 5 stalkers were buried under meters of packed snow. Their signals vanished from the tactical display. But where was Day? The cameras showed nothing but churning white chaos where his cave had been. The avalanche had buried the entire ridge under tons of snow. Surely no one could survive being caught in that. "Emergency extraction protocol activated," the simulation's AI announced. "Cadet life signs lost. Beginning search and rescue." But before the automatic systems could activate, a signal appeared on the tactical display. Weak, but definitely human. Day was alive and moving. How? Frostwalker Yill stared at the display in disbelief. "The avalanche should have killed him instantly." The answer became clear as rescue cameras found Day's position. He hadn't been caught in the avalanche at all. Instead, he had used the explosion to create a breathing pocket in his cave, then sealed himself inside with his emergency supplies. The avalanche had roared over him, but he had been protected by the solid rock around his shelter. It took him 2 hours to dig his way out, using an ice axe and pure determination. When he finally emerged from the snow, he was tired but unharmed. Around him, the landscape had completely changed. Where there had been a ridge and 5 predators, there was now a smooth field of packed snow. 51 hours, Instructor Rothan announced. Cadet Day has not only survived the pack phase, he has exceeded the previous record. The observation deck erupted in amazed conversation. Cadets who had been skeptical now watched with genuine awe. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was a masterclass in adaptive thinking, but the simulation wasn't finished with Day yet. As he stood in the post-avalanche silence, new dangers activated. The 3rd phase of the trial was beginning, and it would test more than his body or his tactical skills. It would test his mind. The hallucinations started small, a voice calling his name in the wind, a glimpse of movement that wasn't there when he looked directly at it. The simulation's psychological warfare systems had activated, designed to break down mental resistance through isolation and fear. Most cadets fell to this phase. The physical challenges could be overcome with training and equipment. But when the mind began to see things that weren't there, when familiar voices called for help from empty snow, most people broke. Day noticed the first hallucination within minutes of the avalanche ending. his grandfather's voice calling to him from somewhere in the white wasteland. "Day! Over here, boy! I'm trapped!" He stopped walking and smiled sadly. "Hello, grandfather. I miss you too." The simulation's AI increased the intensity. The voice became more desperate, more realistic. "Please, Day, I'm hurt. I need help." In the observation deck, cadets watched Day's brain activity on the medical monitors. The patterns showed he was hearing the voices clearly. His auditory centers were fully activated. But something else was happening too. His frontal cortex, the area responsible for logical thinking, remained calm and active. "He knows they're not real," Lee Hanna said, studying the readouts, "but he's not fighting them or trying to ignore them." Instead, Day sat down in the snow and began talking to the voice. "I know you're not really here, grandfather," he said gently, "but I'm glad to hear your voice anyway. I've been thinking about you a lot, about the things you taught me." The simulation's psychological systems tried different approaches. His mother's voice, crying for help. His friends from the academy, claiming they were lost and needed rescue. Even Lee Hanna and Park Min, begging him to save them. To each voice, Day responded the same way. He acknowledged them kindly, spoke to them warmly, but never forgot they weren't real. "Hello, Mother. I love you too. But you're safe at home, aren't you? This is just the simulation trying to scare me." "Hi, Park Min. Yes, I hear you calling. But you're in the observation deck right now, watching me talk to myself. Wave to the cameras for me." Stone-Mind Kef took furious notes as he watched. Incredible. He's treating the hallucinations like old friends. The simulation is designed to create fear and desperation, but he's having conversations with it. Hour after hour, the psychological attacks continued. The simulation showed him images of disasters, his home burning, his family in danger, Earth itself under attack. Each vision was designed to create panic, to make him forget where he was and demand immediate extraction to save people who weren't really in danger. But Day had learned. The final day began with a sound that made even the watchers in the observation deck step back from the windows. It was the roar of wind, so powerful it seemed to shake the academy itself. Inside the simulation, Day faced weather that pushed the limits of what any environment could produce and still allow life to exist. The temperature had dropped to -97 degrees. At this level, exposed skin would freeze solid in under 30 seconds. Breath would freeze in the lungs. Even thinking became difficult as the brain struggled to function in such extreme cold. But worse than the temperature was the wind. It howled across the frozen landscape at speeds that could knock down buildings. Snow didn't fall anymore. It flew like bullets, driven by air currents that could lift a grown person off their feet and hurl them hundreds of meters. In the observation deck, emergency lights flashed red. The simulation's safety protocols were working overtime, monitoring every aspect of Day's condition. His core body temperature was dropping dangerously low. His heart rate was becoming irregular. His brain activity showed signs of cold-induced stress. "He should be dead," Prince Sandor whispered, staring at the medical readouts. "No one can survive in those conditions." Instructor Rothon checked the simulation parameters for the third time. "The system is operating within normal limits. This is what the final phase is supposed to be like." "Then how has no one ever completed it?" Lee Hanna asked. "Because," Frostwalker Yiel said quietly, "it requires surviving the impossible." On the main screen, they could barely see Day through the chaos of the storm. He had wrapped himself completely in his emergency blankets, creating a reflective cocoon that trapped what little body heat he could generate. But it wasn't enough. Even with every survival trick he knew, the cold was winning. Day could feel death approaching. His fingers had gone numb despite his gloves. His toes were blocks of ice in his boots. When he breathed, ice crystals formed in his nose and throat. His grandfather's voice seemed very far away now, lost in the screaming wind. But then he remembered something else his grandfather had taught him, something he had hoped never to use. "Sometimes, boy," the old man had said during one of their mountain trips, "the only way to survive extreme cold is to make friends with it, to stop fighting and become part of the cold yourself." It was called controlled hypothermia, a technique used by extreme mountaineers when they had no other choice. Instead of fighting to maintain normal body temperature, you deliberately lowered, it to reduce the body's need for energy. It was incredibly dangerous. Lower your temperature too much and you would die. But if done correctly, it could allow survival in conditions that would otherwise be impossible. Day began the process slowly and carefully. First, he stopped all unnecessary movement to conserve energy. Then he controlled his breathing, taking slower, deeper breaths to reduce his heart rate. Finally, he began to relax his muscles systematically, allowing his body temperature to drop in a controlled way. In the observation deck, alarms began sounding. Day's core temperature was falling. "Below safe limits. Emergency extraction," Parkman shouted. "His temperature is too low." But Instructor Rothon held up a hand. "Wait. Look at his brain activity." The medical displays showed something extraordinary. As Day's body temperature dropped, his brain patterns had become incredibly calm and focused. Instead of the chaotic activity of someone dying from cold, his mind showed the steady rhythms of deep meditation. He's doing it on purpose, stone-mind Kef realized. He's deliberately entering hypothermia. "That's impossible." Frostwalker. Yield protested. "Controlled hypothermia is a myth. No one can survive with core temperatures that low." But Day was doing exactly that. By reducing his body's energy needs, he had bought himself precious time. His heart beat slower, but it kept beating. His brain activity dropped, but it remained, organized and aware. He had become a living ice sculpture, barely alive but still functioning. The simulation's predator systems chose this moment to launch their final assault. Every remaining Froststalker activated simultaneously, a dozen mechanical hunters converging on Day's position. The system's AI had determined that if cold couldn't kill him, overwhelming force would have to do the job. But the predators faced an unexpected problem. Their thermal sensors were designed to track warm-blooded prey. Day's reduced body temperature made him nearly invisible to their detection systems. He was still warmer than the environment, but barely, just enough to stay alive, not enough to register as a clear target. The stalkers spread out across the area where their systems indicated a heat source should be. But in the chaos of the storm, with snow flying everywhere and their sensors confused by Day's reduced signature, they couldn't locate him precisely. Day watched them through half-closed eyes, moving like ghosts in the white hell around him. He could see their red optical sensors sweeping back and forth, searching for him. Several times one came within meters of his position, but wrapped in his reflective blankets and radiating minimal heat, he might as well have been another piece of ice-covered rock. Hours passed. The stalkers continued their search, their programming insisting that prey was nearby. But as their power cells drained and their sensors failed to find a clear target, they began to shut down one by one. The simulation's AI, faced with the impossible situation of predators that couldn't find prey that was right in front of them, entered an error state. In the observation deck, technicians worked frantically to understand what was happening. "The entire predator system is malfunctioning," one reported to Instructor Rothan. "The stalkers can't maintain target lock." "Is it a system error?" "No, sir. The predators are operating normally. The target is just not there, according to their sensors." "But he's right there." Lee Hanna pointed at the main screen, where Day's nearly motionless form was barely visible through the storm. "The sensors don't think so," the technician replied. "His heat signature is so low that the targeting system classifies him as environmental background, not living prey." As the final hours of the trial approached, something even more extraordinary happened. The simulation's weather system began to malfunction. The storm that had raged for nearly 3 days was powered by complex atmospheric models that assumed certain environmental constants. But Day's presence had introduced variables the system couldn't account for. His controlled hypothermia created unusual air currents around his body. His modified breathing patterns released water vapor at unexpected intervals. His minimal movement created micro-vibrations in the snow that accumulated into larger instabilities. The simulation's weather AI, trying to maintain realistic storm patterns while accounting for these anomalies, began generating increasingly erratic conditions. Wind patterns became chaotic. Temperature readings fluctuated wildly. Snow fell upward in some areas and not at all in others. "The entire system is having a breakdown," Stone-Mind Kef observed, watching the environmental displays flash with error messages. "It can't process what he's doing." Instructor Rothan had never seen anything like it. The simulation is designed to adapt to any survival strategy. How is one human breaking a system that has handled thousands of attempts? Frostwalker Yill studied the data streams with growing wonder. Because he's not fighting the system, he's not trying to beat it or overcome it. He's becoming part of it. And the simulation doesn't know how to handle that. With 2 hours remaining in the trial, Day faced his greatest challenge yet. The extraction point, the finish line he needed to reach, was 50 kilometers away across the most dangerous terrain the simulation could generate. Previous challengers had never even seen this final phase because none had survived long enough to unlock it. But Day was no longer the same person who had entered the simulation 3 days ago. The extreme cold had changed him in ways that went beyond physical adaptation. His mind had achieved a state of clarity that bordered on the supernatural. His body, pushed far beyond normal human limits, had found reserves of endurance he never knew existed. Most importantly, he had learned to read the simulation like his grandfather read mountain weather. Every sound the wind made told him about the terrain ahead. Every shift in temperature revealed the location of obstacles or shelter. The storm that had been his enemy for 3 days had become his guide. He began the final journey not as a human fighting a machine, but as a natural force moving through a landscape that welcomed him. The wind that should have knocked him down instead steadied his steps. The snow that should have blinded him instead showed him the way. The cold that should have killed him instead gave him strength. In the observation deck, cadets watched in absolute silence as Day moved across the impossible terrain. His progress was slow but steady, like a glacier advancing down a mountain. Nothing stopped him. Nothing even seemed to slow him down. 70 hours, Instructor Rothan announced. His voice was barely above a whisper. 2 hours to completion. Prince Sandor stood pressed against the observation window, his earlier arrogance completely forgotten. He's going to do it. By all the gods of all the worlds, he's actually going to do it. But the simulation had one last trick to play. As Day approached the final kilometers, the system activated its ultimate guardian, a massive mechanical predator called the Winter King. 3 meters tall and armed with adaptive. The moment Day's fingers touched the extraction beacon, reality crashed back into existence with startling suddenness. The howling winds vanished. The killing cold disappeared. The endless white wasteland melted away like a bad dream. He found himself standing in the simulation pod, emergency lights flashing red around him. His body felt strange, too warm, too light, too real after days of existing at the very edge of death. Medical technicians rushed forward with heated blankets and warming devices, their faces showing the kind of shocked concern usually reserved for accident victims. But the most shocking thing was the silence. The observation deck, which had been filled with excited chatter for 3 days, was completely quiet. Dozens of cadets from across the galaxy stood frozen, staring at Day as if he were some kind of ghost. Their data pads hung forgotten in their hands. Their betting pools meant nothing now. Someone had done the impossible. Instructor Rothan stood at the control console, his forearms motionless over the shutdown procedures. His blue skin had gone pale, and his usually confident voice was barely a whisper. "Trial completion confirmed," he announced to the silent room. "Time, 71 hours, 47 minutes, 22 seconds. The words seemed to break some kind of spell. Suddenly, the observation deck erupted into chaos. Cadets shouted questions, demanded explanations, argued about what they had just witnessed. Several species representatives were already calling their homeworlds to report this unprecedented event. But through it all, Day just stood in his warming blankets, blinking slowly as his body readjusted to normal temperatures. A medical technician, a small, furry vixen, was taking his vital signs and shaking her head in disbelief. "Core temperature 89 degrees, she reported to Instructor Rothan. "That's hypothermic, but not dangerously so. Heart rate slow, but steady. Brain activity?" She paused, checking her instruments. "Actually, his brain activity is remarkably calm for someone who just completed the trial." Park Min and Lee Hana pushed through the crowd of technicians to reach their friend. Both looked like they had aged years in the past 3 days. "Day." Park Min grabbed his shoulders, as if making sure he was really there. Are you okay? Do you know where you are? Day smiled tiredly. I'm at the academy, in the simulation bay, and I could really use some hot tea. Lee Hana stared at him with something between awe and concern. Do you understand what you just did? You completed the Arctic death trial. No one has ever done that before. No one. I know. Day's voice was quiet, almost matter-of-fact. It was difficult. Prince Sandor pushed his way through the crowd, his golden face showing emotions he had probably never experienced before. The arrogant Sarani prince looked humbled, confused, and perhaps a little frightened. How? He demanded. How did you do what my people's greatest warriors could not? What do you possess that we lack? Before Day could answer, stone-mind Kef appeared beside them, his gray face intense with concentration. I've been analyzing the data from your trial, he said rapidly. Your approach was completely unlike anything we've seen before. You didn't fight the simulation. You adapted to it. You became part of it. Frostwalker Yiel approached more slowly. The tall Glacian moved like someone walking through a dream, his ice-blue eyes fixed on Day with something that might have been reverence. You lasted longer than my people, he said simply. Longer than beings born in ice and snow. How is this possible? Day looked around at all the staring faces, aliens from dozens of worlds, all united in their amazement at what one ordinary human had accomplished. He thought about his grandfather's lessons, about the 3 days of hell he had just endured, about the strange peace he had found in the heart of the storm. My grandfather taught me something, he said finally. He said that survival isn't about being strong enough to fight the mountain. It's about being smart enough to listen to what the mountain is telling you. But the simulation isn't a mountain. Stone-mind Kef protested. It's a machine, a program designed to test limits. Day shook his head. No, it's a conversation. The simulation was trying to teach me something, and I was trying to learn what it had to say. Once I understood that, everything became easier. Instructor Rothan had been listening to this exchange with growing fascination. Now he stepped forward, his 4 arms gesturing for attention. Cadet Day, he said formally, you have achieved something that was believed to be impossible. The Arctic death trial has broken the will and bodies of thousands of candidates. Yet you not only completed it, you completed it with time to spare. He paused, looking around the crowded room. More importantly, you have forced us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about survival training. Your methods challenge our basic assumptions about how intelligent beings interact with hostile environments. Director Krell Vastan chose that moment to arrive. The 6-armed hegemony leader swept into the simulation bay like a force of nature, his multiple limbs moving with obvious agitation. Behind him came a parade of academy officials, military observers, and what looked like news reporters from several different species. Where is he? Vastan demanded, his voice echoing through the chamber. Where is the human who broke our simulation? The crowd parted to reveal Day, still wrapped in warming blankets and looking more tired than triumphant. Vastan stopped short, as if he had expected someone larger, more imposing, more obviously heroic. This is him? The director asked, his tone suggesting disappointment. This small, quiet human completed the Arctic death trial? Yes, sir. Instructor, Rothan confirmed. 71 hours, 47 minutes, full completion. Vastan walked slowly around Day, studying him from every angle. You don't look like much, he said bluntly. No obvious physical advantages, no specialized environmental adaptations. What exactly did you do that thousands of others could not? Day met the director's gaze calmly. I listened, sir. Listened? To what? To what the simulation was trying to teach me. One of the news reporters, a being that looked like a walking crystal formation, stepped forward. Human Day, representatives from 17 different species, are calling this achievement impossible. Some are suggesting the simulation was malfunctioning. How do you respond to these claims? Before Day could answer, Instructor Rothan intervened. I can confirm that all systems operated normally throughout the trial. Every protocol was followed. Every safety measure was in place. What Cadet Day accomplished was done within standard parameters. Then how do you explain it? Another reporter asked. Day thought for a moment. My people have a saying, the reed that bends in the wind survives while the mighty oak breaks. I think maybe other species tried to be the oak. I tried to be the reed. Director Vasten's expression had been changing as he listened to these explanations. The initial skepticism was giving way to something else, a dawning realization of what this achievement might mean. If a human can complete our impossible trial, he said slowly. What does that say about our training methods? About our understanding of survival itself? Stone-minded Kef looked up from his data pad. Sir, I've been analyzing the trial recordings. Cadet Day's approach represents a completely new survival methodology. Instead of conquering hostile environments, he integrated with them. The implications for military training, exploration, and colonization could be enormous. Explain. Current survival doctrine focuses on resistance and endurance, Kef continued. We teach our people to fight environmental challenges, to overcome them through superior technology and determination. But Day's method suggests a different approach: adaptation and integration, working with hostile conditions rather than against them. A Galatian military observer stepped forward. Are you suggesting that this human's techniques could be taught to others? That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Kef replied. And more than that, I believe these techniques could revolutionize how we approach extreme environment operations. The room erupted in excited conversation as the implications sank in. If human survival methods could be learned and applied by other species, it would change everything from military tactics to deep space exploration. But Day seemed unaware of the larger significance of what he had accomplished. He sat quietly on a medical bench, sipping the hot tea someone had finally brought him, looking more like a tired student than a galactic game-changer. Lee Hanna sat down beside him. Do you realize what's happening here? You've just become the most famous human in the galaxy. Every species will want to study your methods. Every military will want to recruit you. Day smiled tiredly. I just wanted to complete the trial, to prove it could be done. Why? Park Min asked. Why was it so important to you? Day thought about his grandfather, about the lessons learned on cold mountain slopes, about the 3 days of conversation with a machine that wanted to kill him. Because sometimes, he said quietly, someone has to be first. Someone has to show that the impossible is just another word for something nobody has figured out how to do yet. Director Vasten was conferring with his advisors, their multiple voices creating a babble of excited planning. Day could hear fragments of their conversation, phrases like new training protocols and adaptive survival techniques and revolutionary methodology. But what interested him more was the change in the other cadets, the ones who had mocked him for even attempting. 3 months after Day completed the Arctic death trial, the Galactic Hunters Academy looked like a completely different place. Where once there had been training programs focused on species-specific strengths, now there were integrated courses teaching adaptive survival methodology. Where once the Academy's motto had been the ancient hegemony war cry, conquer or perish, new words now appeared above every entrance: adapt, endure, overcome. Day stood in what had once been Storage Bay 7, now converted into the Academy's first adaptive survival laboratory. The room was filled with environmental simulation equipment, meditation spaces, and most importantly, cadets from every corner of the galaxy. Sarani sat next to Galatians. Altairs worked alongside Vixens. Even the proudest military observers had become humble students. Before we begin today's lesson, Day said to his mixed species class, I want to remind you of something important. What you're learning here isn't a human technique. It's not a secret that my people discovered. These are just tools that anyone can use once they understand the basic principle. A young Galatian cadet, Ice Walker Kem, Frostwalker Yil's younger, brother, raised his white hand. Teacher Day, my people have always believed that survival means fighting the cold, becoming stronger than the environment. But your method seems to suggest the opposite. Day nodded. What does fighting accomplish, Cadet Kem? Victory over your enemies? But is the cold your enemy? Kem paused, thinking. This was a new concept for his people, who had survived their ice world through generations of resistance and endurance. I had always thought so. Let me ask you something different, Day said, walking to the environmental controls. When you're cold, what does your body do naturally? It shivers to generate heat. It constricts blood vessels to preserve core temperature. Exactly. Your body doesn't fight the cold. It adapts to it. It finds ways to work with the new conditions. Fighting would be like trying to punch winter until it goes away. Several cadets laughed at the image, but Day could see the understanding dawning in their eyes. This was the fundamental shift that had made his Arctic trial completion possible. The recognition that environments weren't enemies to defeat, but conditions to understand and work with. Prince Sandor, who had become one of Dai's most eager students, raised his golden hand. But teacher, how can we adapt to conditions that should kill us? My people evolved in desert heat. How can we learn to thrive in Arctic cold? The same way my grandfather learned to rescue people from mountains that should have killed him, Day replied, by listening to what the environment was teaching. He activated the laboratory's simulation system, creating a miniature blizzard in one corner of the room. The temperature didn't actually drop, but the visual and audio effects were remarkably convincing. Stone-mind Kef, Day called to the methodical Altair. What do you observe about this storm? Kef studied the simulation with his usual precision. Wind patterns suggest the presence of obstacles creating turbulence. The snow distribution indicates thermal variations. The sound frequency suggests... He paused, his gray face showing surprise. The storm is carrying information. Exactly. Every environment communicates constantly. It tells you where shelter might be found, where danger lies, where resources exist. Most people are too busy fighting to listen. Over the following weeks, Day's classes became the most popular courses in Academy history. But more than that, they were producing results. Cadets who had failed basic survival training were now passing advanced courses. Species that had been considered unsuitable for certain environments were discovering unexpected capabilities. The real breakthrough came when Frostwalker Yill returned from a practical exercise on the Academy's Arctic training ground. The proud Glacian, who had held the previous record for the Arctic death trial, approached Day with something that looked like wonder on his white features. I did it, Yill said quietly. I completed the modified trial. Day smiled. How did it feel? Different. Completely different from my first attempt. Instead of fighting the cold, I conversed with it. Instead of resisting the wind, I let it guide me. Yill paused, struggling with concepts that went against everything his people had taught him. It was almost peaceful. Word of Yill's success spread quickly. If a Glacian could improve their performance using human techniques, what did that mean for other species? Within days, every major military and exploration organization in the galaxy was sending representatives to study the new methods. But the most significant change came from an unexpected source. Director Vasten called a general assembly, gathering every cadet and instructor in the Academy's main hall. When he spoke, his 6 arms moved with obvious excitement. Fellow beings, he announced, we have received a request that will change the future of this academy. The Hegemony Council has asked us to develop a new kind of survival specialist, beings trained not just in their own species' strengths, but in adaptive techniques that work across all environments. The hall buzzed with excited conversation. This was unprecedented. The hegemony had always relied on species specialization, using the right beings for the right environments. More than that, Vasten continued, they want these specialists, trained using the methodologies developed by Instructor Day. All eyes turned to Day, who was sitting quietly in the middle of the crowd. He had been promoted from cadet to instructor almost overnight, though he still felt strange about the title. This means, Vasten said, that humans will no longer be considered a minor species, suitable only for diplomatic exchanges. Your people will become the foundation of a new kind of galactic explorer, beings capable of surviving anywhere, adapting to anything. After the assembly, Day found himself surrounded by cadets asking questions, requesting private lessons, and seeking advice on everything from survival techniques to life philosophy. It was overwhelming and more than a little ironic. 6 months ago, he had been the quiet exchange student nobody noticed. Now he was the most sought-after instructor in the galaxy. Lee Hanna and Park Min found him later that evening, sitting alone in the Academy's observation lounge. Through the transparent aluminum windows, they could see the stars that represented thousands of worlds where humans were now welcome as survival specialists and environmental adapters. "How does it feel?" Hannah asked, settling into a chair beside him. "Being the most famous human in the galaxy?" Day shrugged. "Strange. I just wanted to complete a trial that couldn't be completed. I never meant to change anything." "But you did change things," Park Min said. "Earth's status in the galactic community has completely transformed. We're not just another species anymore. We're the species that thinks differently." Through the lounge windows, they could see shuttles arriving and departing constantly. Military observers from the Altair Defense Corps, exploration teams from the Rim worlds, even a delegation from the mysterious Hegemony Corps worlds who rarely involved themselves in Academy affairs. "What happens now?" Hannah asked. Before Day could answer, the lounge doors opened and Instructor Rothan entered. The four-armed Kalari looked tired but satisfied, carrying data pads filled with reports and requisitions. "Instructor Day," he said, formally, then smiled. "I still can't get used to calling you that. I have some news that might interest you." "What kind of news?" "The Glacian Dominion has formally requested that you establish a training center on their homeworld. They want their entire survival corps retrained using your methods." Rothan paused, consulting his datapad. "The Sarani Empire has made a similar request, as have the Altair Defense Corps, the Rim World Exploration Service, and 17 other organizations." Day stared at him. "They want me to train their people? They want you to revolutionize how their people think about survival itself." Rothan set down his datapads and looked directly at Day. "Do you understand what you've accomplished? You haven't just completed an impossible trial. You've created a new way of thinking about the relationship between intelligent beings and hostile environments." That night, alone in his quarters, Day sat quietly and thought about his grandfather. The old man had died 2 years before Day left Earth for the Academy. He had never seen his grandson become famous, never known that his mountain rescue techniques would spread across the galaxy. But somehow, Day felt like his grandfather knew anyway. The lessons that had seemed so simple on Earth's mountains: listen to the weather, work with the environment instead of against it, find peace in the heart of the storm, had become the foundation for a new kind of galactic explorer. 6 months later, Day stood before his largest class yet. Representatives from 43 species filled the Academy's main auditorium, all eager to learn what the quiet human could teach them about surviving the impossible. "Before we begin," he said, his voice carrying easily through the hall, "I want to tell you about my grandfather. He was a mountain rescue specialist on Earth. He spent his life saving people who had gotten lost in places that wanted to kill them." The audience listened intently. By now, stories of the legendary grandfather had spread throughout the galaxy, though most of them were greatly exaggerated. "He taught me that survival isn't about being stronger than your environment," Day continued. "It's about being smart enough to understand what your environment is telling you.